Good morning. Coming to you this morning from Bardstown, the bourbon capital of the world. Today we're going to talk about earnest money. What is it? Where does it go? What's it used for? And how it factors into your home ownership. We're back. So today we're going to talk about earnest money. What is earnest money? How does it come in to an offer? Simple definition of earnest money is good faith money. When you have won an offer, the first thing you need to do is write out an earnest money check. So you are saying you are earnestly going to buy this home. The amount of earnest money is affected usually by the amount of the house. Typically, earnest money is 1 to 3% of the value of the home. So a $200,000 home, your earnest money would be $2,000 if it was at 1%. Sometimes the buyer has a call on that. Sometimes it's the realtors that kind of set that out, but it is part of your offer. When an agent writes an offer on the house you want to purchase, it's written right in there that you will put forth X amount of dollars as earnest money. So what happens to that earnest money? Well, in the case of Kentucky, within 48 hours, earnest money checks must be deposited or held by some type of agency. In our case with United Real Estate, we don't hold earnest money, so it would be held by wherever the loan is going to be closed. So in our case, normally I use a title company in Louisville. I have them write a check out to that title company, and I either drive it up to Louisville or mail it, or if they're from Louisville, sometimes I have them drop it off. But I also need to have a photocopy of that check. I keep that in a file to prove that they wrote it out, so if something happens with it, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes earnest money gets lost in a folder or something, and as long as I have a photocopy of it, I can say, here it is, it was written out on this date, it was mailed to you, and they always find it. It's just usually a clerical error. So what happens with that earnest money? It becomes part of your purchase. So in that $200,000 example, you wrote a check out for $2,000. It's being held by the closing company. 3 days before closing, the realtor will get a copy of the closing statement. The buyer will see it as well. The seller will see it as well. Everybody gets to have their eyes on it to make sure everything is correct on it. If the purchase price of the home was $200,000 and you've put down a $2,000 good faith money, you're now financing $198,000 because that $2,000 comes off the top. That goes to the seller. It's on the seller side of the transaction. What about tax implications? A lot of people question what's going to happen to that money in the 30 to 45 days it takes to close the home. It's being held by the closing agency. There really isn't any tax things to worry about because it's such a short period of time. They don't typically cash them until right before closing, so it's just being held. It's still in your bank account, but it does get cashed, and it gets cashed before closing, so that money is part of what the buyer is giving the seller at the closing. So what happens if the deal falls apart? Earnest money is there to assure the seller that you're going to buy the home. If for some reason you back out of the transaction for a valid reason, let's say the home inspection reveals that there is so much wrong that you're just not comfortable buying that house. That is typically a valid reason to get your earnest money back. Another reason, and we'll go into these in more detail in another video, what happens if the house doesn't appraise? You wanted to buy the house for $200,000. The appraisal come back at $175,000. So what happens? Typically, there is a negotiation process. And if that negotiation process doesn't end in we're still going to buy the house, then you would typically get your earnest money back. There are reasons why you would not get your earnest money back. Let's say you've made it through the home inspection and you've made it through the appraisal, and all of a sudden you find a house that you have fallen in love with more than the one you were going to buy, and you say, don't want it, I'm done, I'm backing out. First of all, that's contractually you're bound to that house. If the seller decides to let you out of that contract, they are entitled to that earnest money because you, in good faith, were going to buy that house. You backed out of the deal. You're contractually obligated to that deal. If the seller wants to, they can actually take you to court and force you to buy that home. If they say, okay, I'll let you out of the deal, but I'm keeping your earnest money, I'll just sell it to another buyer, then you do not get your money back. In some cases, once you write out that earnest money, the seller owns it, no matter what. If you back out because of the home inspection, or you back out because of the appraisal, the home owner is still entitled to that money. I have not, in any of my transactions, come into a case where the seller says you can't have it back, but it can happen. So you need to be committed to buying a house. If you're going to write an offer on a house, you need to be committed to buying that house. You're entering into a legal contract. We'll talk more about that in other videos. So for today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the earnest money and answer any questions you may have. Feel free to get a hold of me with a question. You can text me, call me, or email me. All the information's on my website. Thanks for listening. I'll be back with another video in the next week. I appreciate your time. Have a great day.